Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Again, my name is Dave Nagel. Very excited to share with my friends and colleagues from Central Unified. Today's webinar is an overview of John Hattie's model for effective feedback. So I'm going to jump right in. If you got your working handout in front of you, hopefully you have a chance to follow along and complete a few short reflection activities. Again, a little bit of background about myself. Most of you have seen several of these webinars or seen me in person. Most of my career has been in secondary, but I'm very fortunate that twice because of doing it with different companies, I've been able to become certified in John Hattie's visible learning research. And part of going through the overview on the research portion, while we have to dig into the research and know what it tells us, we also have to be cautious of not getting caught up in the numbers. But today we're going to dig into one of his studies related to feedback. And our success criteria by the end of this webinar is you'll be able to list some essential elements needed for feedback to become effective and increase learning, and then state specific elements of Hattie's instructional model for feedback. Dylan Wiliam, in his study late in the 90s, early 2000s, Inside the Black Box with Black, talked about effective feedback doubling the speed of learning. I'm going to ask us to reflect just for a moment. Think about a time in your life when you've experienced either effective feedback or ineffective feedback. And I want to stress the point that effective feedback would have made you grow and develop in that area. Ineffective, you wouldn't have been able to grow or develop. Take a moment and think about that. Now, what I didn't say was positive or negative feedback. And I think we get caught up there a little bit. And I'm willing to bet that at any time you received feedback that helped you grow and develop, that was effective, it met these four criteria. It was corrective in nature to some degree. And even though it was corrective in nature, it didn't cause us to crawl into a shell and lose all of our self-esteem. It was timely. It was in the right time frame that we could use it. It was specific to a criterion. There was something specific about it. Golf coaches are amazing at giving very meticulous, specific feedback about one element of your swing. And even if you hit the ball well, they'll stop and say, no, your elbow was off. Let's go back there. And then finally, we were able to use the feedback in the absence of the teacher. That even when the teacher was gone, the feedback that they gave us, we were able to apply it and monitor our learning to some degree. And so we can use that as a backdrop to say, okay, if that's the type of feedback that helped us grow in anything, whether it was learning how to ride a bike or throw a football or even write an essay, we can apply the same aspects when we're in the classroom. Feedback, in a nutshell, will always need to meet one simple criteria. If there's one takeaway, it needs to meet the Goldilocks principle. It's just right for me. It's just in time when I can use the information and do the most good with it. So it doesn't always have to do anything with the amount or the quantity or anything else, but can I use and apply it in the moment? We've talked a lot about the average effect of everything that we do in school is 0.4. Feedback comes in at 0.75, but I want to be, again, cautious. That 0.75, while it's almost double the average, there's so many studies around feedback. Getting feedback to move as a whole construct in terms of the study would be pretty limited. Sort of the number of men in the world, or the men that are living in the world, we have an average lifespan of about 75 years. That number is not going to change too much overnight with the amount of humans that are living now and the number of people that would have to live and die to a certain level. It's going to stay at 0.75 no matter what any individual does. So within feedback, we can dig and realize there's some aspects that will make it be even higher. The average is 0.75, which alone is double the average, and that's why we say it doubles the speed of learning. A lot of us, myself included, would say we give our students great feedback, but we have to be cautious because what do they hear? What students hear and what we give are not always the same thing. And as we walk through some examples here, I want to be cautious of thinking that just because we've given the feedback, that it was received at the level we wanted it to. Graham Nuttall and his research is fascinating. As he was teaching middle school, he was also miking up students and at the end of the day listening to their conversations, and he found that approximately 80% of student feedback the students receive is from peers. And 80% of it is wrong. 80% of the feedback students receive is incorrect from peers. Now, that doesn't mean we stop them from giving each other feedback because we can't. We talked a lot about success criteria. The more effective the success criteria is, the more students can provide each other effective feedback. In your handout, you have a sheet that looks like this. It's about 7 statements that are a brief research summary around feedback. Please take a moment and pause the recording and read through these 7 statements and reflect on which one do you find most interesting or compelling and why. Take a moment, pause the recording. If you're with a group, have a conversation. Come back in just a moment. Welcome back. Hopefully you had a chance to read through this and often get a lot of dialogue when we do this with groups. Most people don't disagree with a lot of it, but they think about what it applies to them in real life, and then when they apply it down to the classroom. That first one I think is critical. Feedback must be intertwined with instruction. Anything we do with our students should drive how we provide them feedback. Number 5 is one that sometimes teachers will note, that it's more effective when it provides information on something correct than incorrect. Now, when we talk about task feedback in a little bit, that doesn't mean we're not going to provide feedback when students are getting something wrong. But the more that we can build on something that's in place, even better. And we'll talk about how we apply that one to the feedback model shortly. The purpose of feedback is simply always to close the gap. This is where I need to be. That's a success criteria. This is where I am right now. Feedback needs to fill it in. I want us to think for a moment how conceptually simple this can be, and maybe how we maybe overcomplicate it in the classroom. But if we think about how feedback is applied with students, think about when they play PlayStation or video games. They know where they need to be. They know where they are now, and they're constantly monitoring that and providing themselves feedback. So we have to think about how we can help fill that gap, whether it's from ourselves, from their peers, from each other, from the success criteria we provide to guide their learning, to help fill whatever gap they have in that current moment. In your handout, you have an example of what we'll look at, what we call Hattie's instructional model for feedback, that involves 3 pieces. The first one is task. We provide task feedback when students are new or emergent, and is often related to correct or incorrect answers. Now, as I mentioned a moment ago, it's not that we're not going to provide feedback to students when they're incorrect. If they're getting order of operations wrong, if they're doing division before multiplication in that process, if they're confusing homozygous and heterozygous, if they're struggling understanding what a noun or a verb or subject-verb agreement, early in learning, we want to intervene and help them with that. But once there's some degree of proficiency, so imagine if a student has gotten 3 problems correct and then the next 2 they get wrong, we might want to go, so why do you think you're getting it wrong? Because a little while ago you got it right. When there's some degree of proficiency, we might begin to ask questions because we want the learners to process where they're at in their learning. Self-regulation is when there's a high degree of proficiency, when we want them to begin to regulate their own learning. So if we hand a student a textbook that is 3 or 4 lexile above their level, we say, listen, this is going to be a challenging text. What pre-reading strategies do you think you're going to use? Notice what I did. I didn't say, here's a challenging text, I would like you to use these reading strategies. I didn't guide their learning. I let them be empowered to go, okay, you're a good reader. What should you be doing? Because those strategies work best for you. Self-feedback, often in the form of praise, is about the individual. If we were to say, you are so smart, or you aren't trying hard, or you did a great job, it's about them, not the process. And rarely is that effective for learning and growth. I'm going to ask you to take a moment and pause the recording. You have a couple pages in your handout just to refer to a little bit deeper of what I've shared, a summary chart with some prompts. Just take a moment, review that, have as much of a reflection as you would need individually, or if you're in a group, around Hattie's feedback model that's specific to those first 3 points: task, process, and self-regulation. Be back in just a moment. Welcome back. Hopefully you had a chance to reflect on what I've shared, look at the charts, and we're going to dig in just a little bit more. Praise is ineffective for the product or the performance. When we tell a student, great job, but you might have made 3 or 4 mistakes, what students hear very often, almost always, is great job. It's not that we will never again say great job. We need to be cautious of how we use praise and when we use it. And why this is a challenge for teachers is students often prefer praise. Interesting study by DeLuke and Summer that found in industrialized countries like the United States, we actually prefer praise. We want to be told how good we are. We want to be liked. If you don't believe me, take a look at your Facebook page and some of your friends who will post their cappuccino waiting for 17 of their friends to like it, and then they'll drink it and talk about how it made them feel, and then they want more people to like that. It's interesting they found in Confucian-based cultures, they're often offended by praise. They're more interested to hear what they're doing right or wrong. So again, we all acknowledge we all like to feel good. We have to be cautious with how we use praise. We want to praise the effort. We want to praise the resilience. We want to praise the process, not the product, not the innate abilities. So let's look at a couple real life examples. I have 3 boys at home, so hopefully someday I'll have to go through this process, and some of you have been through it, but what I mean is teaching them how to drive. If you ever taught someone how to drive, here's an example of task feedback that you might provide someone. You need to look both ways. It's not personal, it's direct, it's specific. Got to be specific around that feedback. It's nice to know that the left pedal actually does stop the car, and you slammed on the brakes to do that. That's good. What else could you be thinking about next time you're on ice? Okay, we've been going on the interstate a few times. We've done it on Saturday mornings. About to go into rush hour traffic. What should you be thinking about? Notice that I made it a form of a question. I didn't say, hey, we're going out into rush hour, fix the mirrors, turn the radio off, etc. For 2 reasons. Number one, I want to make sure that learner, my son or whoever I'm teaching, I want to help them monitor their own learning. And number two, with high degree of proficiency, sometimes they will divert from the things we're asking them to do because they might think they know how to do it. We wouldn't take a new driver out onto the expressway during rush hour traffic. Great job, Nick. Doesn't tell him what he did right or wrong. So again, we can think about how we apply this in real life. I talk about process feedback a lot in terms of asking questions. Those of you that have children probably at some point in time have said, what were you thinking? Well, that implies that you've established some morals and values with your children. You wouldn't ask your 4-year-old, what were you thinking when you touched the hot stove? Once there's a degree of proficiency or we should expect some understanding, we then move into the form of questions. I'll leave this up for just a moment. Simple example when we're plotting an axis in math. You're getting the horizontal one correct, the vertical one's off. Last 4 times you did it, why do you think you're doing it now? Notice in that process example there, it's related to the strategies they're using. Self-regulation. Not only have you nailed it, but I want you to help someone else. What errors would you look for? So what I'm highlighting is if you're proficient in this skill, you should be working with someone else and not doing it for them, but looking for errors in their learning. Great job plotting the axis, Chris. Doesn't really help him with his next learning step. So again, it's not just that we would ever not say great job. Great effort. Way to be precise. That's a little bit different. It was about the process that they would have used. A couple other final points. We can talk about feedback that not just from teacher to student, but student to the teacher. One thing you see here on this example is something Hattie talks about, is the difference between feedback and feed forward. Feedback is when I need you to grow and improve. Feed forward is when you're already a level of improvement, you're already a level of proficiency, and I'm wanting to kind of push you to the next level. We do this with students, but again, we need to provide that avenue and opportunity for the students to provide feedback to ourselves. If you've watched the video on assessment capable learners and the 4 colored box example, where students have a chance to give feedback to their teacher. And finally, just as a footnote, an important element is where's their level of relational trust? It's critical that the adults in the school can give each other feedback. Brick and Schneider found that out of all of the schools in the Chicago school turnaround, the schools that made gains in the early 2000s, the only common element for the schools that made improvement was effective relational trust, deep levels of honest relational trust within the PLCs. We have to be able to give honest, efficacious feedback to our peers around how they're teaching and learning before we can ever give it to our students. So wanted to put that other piece in place as well. So going back to our success criteria for this webinar, by the end of this webinar, you should have been able to list some of the essential elements needed for feedback to be effective and then increase learning. And then state some of those elements of the feedback model: task, process, self-regulation, and you have several tools to know when you might be able to use them. As always, I'm so excited to work with all my colleagues in Central. I think it's such a first-class organization. The professionalism and desire to grow and learn and allow me to be your facilitator has really been really just a great experience, and I continue to look forward to do that in the future. If you have any thoughts or questions on this particular webinar, I put my Corwin email, dave.nagel@corwinlearning.net. Please don't hesitate anytime to reach out and ask me any questions or any thoughts you have. So I hope you've enjoyed this webinar and got a chance to take something away from it. I look forward to talking with everyone soon.